The day as if it were carved into the marrow of my bones, the day a little girl stood tall before the biggest man I'd ever seen and said words that hushed a whole town. "I'm not afraid of you." Just 4 simple words, but they carried the weight of thunder rolling across the plains. It was late summer in our dusty frontier town, when the air felt heavy enough to choke on, and tempers were just as hot. Folks were gathered out front of the mercantile, watching a stranger who had ridden in on a horse black as coal and near as wide as a wagon. He was a giant of a man, broad shoulders that stretched the seams of his coat, long arms hanging loose but powerful, and a face shadowed by a hat pulled low. Nobody knew his name, but the way he carried himself, slow, deliberate, like every step was measured, made men uneasy. Women whispered, children clutched at their mothers' skirts. Some swore he was an outlaw, others said he was running from something darker. I remember standing there myself, my hands folded tight at my waist, my heart doing a nervous jig. I'd been alone since Pa died the winter before, and I knew all too well how men with haunted eyes and heavy silence could bring trouble. The sheriff was out of town, so the weight of watching fell on us. No one dared speak, not until a slip of a child pushed her way through the circle. She couldn't have been more than 8, hair the color of sun-bleached straw, freckles splattered across her cheeks like stars in a wide prairie sky. Her mama gasped and reached for her, but that girl wriggled free and stood right in the dust at the giant's boots. The townsfolk sucked in their breath all at once, like the whole place was holding it. And then came those words. "I'm not afraid of you." The cowboy froze, his head lifting slow, and when his eyes met hers, something shifted in him, something deep, like a river breaking free of its ice. I swear I saw his jaw clench, not in anger, but as though he were holding back the kind of storm a man spends years trying to bury. The town expected him to laugh, or worse, but instead he went down on one knee in front of her, his shadow swallowing her small frame whole. "You oughta be," he rumbled, his voice low as distant thunder. "World's got reason enough to fear men like me." But that child didn't blink. She tilted her chin and said, clear as a church bell on Sunday, "Maybe. But you look like you need a friend more than anyone else here." The silence that followed was near unbearable. Even the cicadas seemed to hush. I watched his hands tremble as he reached up to take off his hat. The sun fell across his face then, and for the first time, I saw him plain. He wasn't monstrous, he was tired. Worn down like leather boots dragged too many miles. His eyes, dark and heavy, carried more sorrow than cruelty. That was the moment my own fear cracked. For beneath the shadow of that man's size and mystery lay something softer, something I recognized in myself, loneliness. The girl's mother finally swept in, scooping her child away, apologizing in rushed whispers, but the giant just stood and nodded, quiet as a mountain. He didn't threaten, didn't boast. Instead, he tied his horse by the hitching post and walked straight into the saloon without another word. From that day, the town was split clean in half. Some folks muttered he was dangerous and cursed the girl for daring him. Others, myself among them, began to wonder what story hid behind his silence. And though I tried to mind my own business, I found my eyes following him whenever he crossed the street, my heart tugged by something I couldn't name. I was working at the boarding house then, cooking for the men who came through. One evening, when the lamps were lit and the smell of beans and cornbread filled the room, he came to the door. The other boarders stiffened, but he didn't make a scene, just stood there, hat in hand, and asked if there was work. His voice cracked on the word work, like it had been a long time since he'd asked for anything. Against my better judgment, I told him we always needed wood chopped out back. And so he began to show up each evening, splitting logs with the strength of 10 men, his silence saying more than words ever could. I brought him water, sometimes a plate of food, and slowly, pieces of him unfolded. Not through confessions or boasts, but through small, telling things. The careful way he brushed sawdust from his trousers before stepping inside. The gentle nod he gave me when I handed him bread. The quiet thank you he whispered when he thought no one was listening. And then, one evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky burned with colors too wild for paint, I asked the question that had been pressing on my tongue for weeks. "Why do you come here?" He set the axe down, leaned on the handle, and looked out toward the horizon. "Because I heard a place this quiet might forgive a man who can't forgive himself." I didn't press him, though I wanted to. His answer told me enough. He carried burdens heavier than his broad shoulders. And somehow, I wanted to help him carry them. Over time, the town softened. Folks began to see what I'd seen, that the giant cowboy wasn't here to cause harm. It was the little girl's bravery that had cracked open his shell, but it was the everyday kindness of work, food, and gentle company that began to mend him. I'll never forget the day he finally spoke more than a few words. He'd finished stacking wood, and I handed him a biscuit I'd saved from supper. He took it, his big hand nearly swallowing mine, and said, "You're not afraid of me either, are you?" I shook my head. "No. Not anymore." His eyes softened then, like the weight of the world had lifted just enough for him to breathe. That night, when the little girl passed by with her mama, she waved to him. He bent low, touched the brim of his hat, and for the first time, I saw him smile, a small, fragile thing, but real. And the town, once divided, seemed to breathe easier. Looking back now, I realize how that moment shaped all of us. The girl's courage showed us that even the fiercest looking souls may just be aching for mercy. The giant cowboy reminded us that men aren't defined by their shadows, but by how they choose to step out of them. As for me, well, I came to know him more than any other. I came to see the man beneath the legend, to walk beside him as he slowly stitched his life back together with work, laughter, and yes, love. So when I hear the whisper of wind through the cottonwoods, I often think of that child, standing in the dust, declaring her fearlessness. And I think of the way it stunned us all, not because of what she said, but because of what it awakened in him, and in me.